Yes, Phyllis, can I ask you to get me the white tub from over there, please? And the Cristiano, my friend, the other one?
No.
Now, first, we must clean them.
Primo, Timpano, are you crazy? There's not the time.
And the second, you start the rabbit.
What's Timpano?
So this is going to be a slightly different take on Backroom Butcher. I don't have William with me, and this is more of a running commentary, a la Chef John or Binging with Babish, with the latter being appropriate, as I'm tackling the most intense dish of my life. That's right, the Timpano from Big Night. Now, it should be noted that I discovered Babish via the Timpano because of my love of Big Night and not the other way around. I saw the film back in 1999 and have loved it ever since. Being able to tackle this dish was a dream of mine after my mother attempted it many years ago. She made certain shortcuts that I planned on avoiding. I made this dish over 3 days. I will start by saying that after making this dish, I discovered the potential of customization that could go along with it. A timpano is not a set of ironclad rules, or rather, I don't think it should be. You should look at it the same way as one would look at a pizza or a lasagna. The first step, at least for me, involves the meatballs. This begins with torn bread, but you can use breadcrumbs, a dash of milk or buttermilk, 3 garlic cloves, meaning 4, 2 ounces, meaning 3, of Parmesan cheese, and half a yellow onion, which you can clearly see should have been chopped finer. I also added a 1/4 cup of chopped parsley, and as you can only get parsley in large bunches, you're going to see that again real soon. Yes, I don't actually have footage of the ingredients assembly. I had a corrupted file. To that, add a generous pinch of salt and pepper. The recipe also suggests pancetta or bacon, chuck, short rib, ground pork, and demi-glace. That's dummy glass, like a stupid window. Dummy glass. I, however, decided not to do any of that. Instead, I mixed a pack of ground chorizo with freshly ground inside round, combined all of that with a whipped egg and fried in batches, turning, when necessary, in a thin layer of oil. I'm using high-quality bacon lard. Next up is the sauce, which came out amazing. It involves some Italian sausage, sweet or spicy, cooked in a pot with casings removed. I added some more bacon fat and fried both a finely chopped onion, won't make that mistake again, along with 2, meaning 4, garlic cloves. The recipe called for a carrot. I did not have one. A squirt, that's right, you heard right, a squirt of tomato paste. Fry that off before a generous glug of red wine. I selected a local Meritage from a BC winery called Origin. Little plug for them. The recipe then called for San Marzano tomatoes, specifically 2 28-ounce cans. Oddly, everywhere I looked, I could only find the larger 2.84-liter can, which is like 100 fluid ounces. So in it goes. Instead of passing it through a grinder, I just used a potato masher. Don't ask about the towel. I don't like getting my hands dirty. After the wine cooked off, I added the tomato. Let that come to a boil before adding some basil. Yes, mine comes from a tube. I regret nothing. At which point, the cooked sausages went back into the sauce to finish infusing. I'll eventually repeat that with the meatballs from the day earlier. Yeah, we're a day into the future now. I should have mentioned that. Time for parsley. Remember what I said earlier? Well, after removing the stems, I chopped up the rest, and in it all went. After this whole experience, I discovered that the parsley would have made an excellent garnish for the final dish. Hindsight is 20/20. Salt was added to taste along with a generous offering of pepper. At some point, I did add the meatballs, and then I let the whole thing cook for about 4 hours. I separated the meat and placed them in their container, and everything went into the fridge for the next day. On to day 3. Time for the dough. I am using Farina 00 flour, the proper choice for this crust. 36 ounces, give or take. In retrospect, it should have been give. I needed a lot more, along with more moisture. When you see a recipe, often they state it assuming a certain bowl size or altitude. Yes, you heard right. As such, this final batch needed considerably more moisture than indicated. That indication required 2 whole eggs and 6 egg yolks. I honestly would have added more yolk or swapped out 2 yolks with 2 whole eggs. I ended up on the fly adding water. I should have added more egg and a few more ounces of flour to roll this out very thin. It was also hard to knead, which might have led to the disaster you'll soon discover. The recipe also asks to do this on an open table, but as amateurs know how hard it is to maintain a hollow in flour, do yourself a favor and use a metal bowl. The dough also called for oil and salt. This is not kosher, as you can see. It's Szechuan peppercorn salt, because reasons. You can use any salt you have. The flour is packed airtight, so I had to spend a moment to break it up, realizing then my fingernails were too long and I desperately had to trim. That shirt was from another winery in BC, by the way. After mixing, I transferred it to a surface and assembled, kneading until it came together. You should let this rest for 30 minutes in a wrap. While I wait, make the rest of the sausage. Probably need 8. Italian sausage is the ass, but you can go for anything. I used a mix of half sweet and half spicy. I removed the casings from all of them because, well, I figured it would be easier to cut through in the final pie. It also allowed more of the juices to escape, flavorful juices, which I am not going to waste. While that cooks, I'm going to tackle the cheese. While you may assume Parmesan, and that wouldn't be discouraged, I followed the recipe by adding a pound of shredded provolone and a pound of cubed low-moisture mozzarella. This is a situation where a local cheesemonger might not deliver, as they generally offer the fresh kind. A local grocer will have what you need. Check the label and purchase the lowest percentage you can find. Anything around the low 40s is probably the best you're going to find. You can tear it. I cut it. You can decide. This brings us back to those juices. What did I do? Well, I took some of that 00 farina flour, made a roux, added a dash of water, wine, and, well, I improvised. I wanted this sauce to hold everything together, and the only way I could think of doing that was to use an egg. You don't have to do this. I tempered a whipped egg by adding some of the roux until it came up to temp, then whisked all of it together thoroughly until creamy, and then the whole thing got added to the sauce, which I had just removed from the fridge. I reheated that in preparation for the next step. And then a drop of hot sauce landed on my foot. If only that was the worst thing that occurred this day. Once again, check for seasoning. Time to roll out the dough. My kitchen table, the largest flat surface I have that's not a dining table, sits on wheels which I can lock, but not very well. I should have pushed it against the wall, but as you can see, it's already marked. I thought I had removed everything under the table that could jostle, but I forgot about the 9 stacked glass bowls that were brought closer to the edge of the table's lower shelf with every push of the rolling pin. And then, disaster.
Are you okay?
I'm okay. The bowls are not.
I guess you can say that I'm thankful my toe broke the fall of the bowls, but 4 of them did shatter on my foot. The fact my toe wasn't broken was honestly a bit of a miracle. I will not go down without a fight. Thankfully, my wife was there for moral support, and she cleaned my mess while I treated my injured toe in ice. With that out of the way, I returned to my rolling, and this was an ordeal. I had to constantly splash it with water to prevent the whole thing from drying out, and as you can see, I had to constantly switch between the dowel and the rolling pin. Not kidding, this took me nearly an hour. It's a miracle the dough didn't tear, but I guess that's a credit to the flour, eggs, and the resting time to allow the gluten to form. Also, you can see I ran out of real estate, and if you can believe it, this was still not large enough for the vessel. Speaking of the bowl, almost every new quote-unquote recipe recommends the use of a Dutch oven between 5 and 6 quarts. I did not have one, but I am Portuguese, so while I didn't have an actual Timpano drum-shaped bowl, I did have an enamel bowl that fit the bill. Actually, I had 2. A 4.5 quart and a sizable 7 quart bowl, and I was almost tempted to use a larger one. Glad I didn't. Don't forget to line the bowl with oil. I used a combination of the sausage fat from earlier with olive oil, and I was pretty generous in hopes the whole thing would pop out of the mold when everything was finished. Good plan. As you can see, the dough fits nicely. The black dots are from the salt. So, let's build this thing. Whoa, wait. I forgot the pasta. Now, Babish and the original film would have you make the Garganelli pasta by hand, but we all know you're not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. You can use penne or rotini. Thanks to connections, I found someone who sells dried Garganelli. This pasta was okay, but I probably could have done better with penne. In retrospect, this Garganelli was super fragile. You're probably asking, does my toe hurt? And yes it does. So much so that I started drinking. Thankfully, I had made a fresh batch of eggnog a few days prior. This was inspired by a YouTube channel, How to Drink, whipping up 4 eggs, whites and yolks separately with sugar, combining them with a mix of cream and milk, and adding a copious glug of rum. I went further and made butterscotch. I added the cream to make a nice caramel and added all of that to the nog. How much rum? Well, just less than too much, so taste and add until you reach a mix you like. For me, that was like half a bottle. Don't judge me. It's Christmas, as you can see. I was nearly out because it was Boxing Day. Okay, now it's time to build the timpano. Ironically, with all that pasta sauce, I only ended up using about 2 cups mixed with all that pasta. I used the entire bag, which may appear like a lot, but it's all going to get used. The recipe called for a specific pattern of layers, but seriously, I don't think you need to follow one. I did start with a layer of Garganelli. Okay, maybe with 3 cups of sauce. A thin layer to cover the bottom before switching to The eggs. Yes, I never mentioned the eggs until now. About 8 hard-boiled eggs. I steamed them for 6 minutes in a pressure cooker, let out the steam slowly before dumping them into an ice bath for another 5 minutes. I cut them lengthwise and placed them over the pasta layer. Some alternative videos online suggest avoiding the eggs. I wouldn't. I think they should be there. It adds a lot of variation against the layers of cheese and meat. I ended up using all the eggs save for 2, so there wouldn't be more than 1 layer of eggs. I then added in the shredded provolone, a generous heap. I ended up using all of that in 2 layers. After this, we're going to add the sausages. You can do the meatballs, but I went with the sausages without casing, mixing in the sweet and spicy. Following that up, I added another layer of pasta and then the cubed mozzarella. It called for 1-inch cubes, and I felt they were a little big, so I tore up a bunch until I had a nice mix. All of that got used as well. You'll notice I took this moment to push everything down, which I think is critical. You don't want this thing to fall apart, and if there's a lot of space, it likely will. After that, more meatballs, each torn in half. Still not done. More provolone, followed by the rest of the pasta, followed by a layer of thinly sliced sauce passata or Genoa salami. In retrospect, I should have added the salami halfway through instead of it sitting at the bottom. Again, I pushed the whole thing down to maximize space. The last of the cube mozzarella. By the way, next time I'll make sure to mount the camera the other way. All said and done, everything was used save for 2 eggs and 2 sausages. I filled up the cracks with the remaining pasta and folded the dough over. And I suspected there were gaps. I was concerned that the sauce would dribble out and that the dough would be too thin. Turns out neither was an issue. However, one way is to cut away the excess folded dough and use that to fill in the gaps, which I did. However, I was still concerned, so I added a layer of puff pastry along the bottom, which I didn't need and ended up removing anyway. The cutting and the replacing are good, or you can have an opening at the bottom. Remember, this bottom faces down, so no one will see it. Plus, an egg wash will seal the pieces together. I topped it with tinfoil, which stuck to the egg wash, so I wouldn't do that. I would cook it uncovered for 30 minutes, remove it, add the tinfoil, put it back for the remaining 90 minutes. That's right, 2 hours at 375 degrees Fahrenheit. And what? Yes, it's a toaster oven. I don't have an actual oven. 30 minutes, then spin it around. I also might add that this toaster oven is solid reliable for temperature. Too many full-size ovens can't keep their temperature consistent. Now it's out, and you can see that strip of puff pastry, which I did need and will eventually be removing. I flipped it onto the wooden Lazy Susan, which turned out to be a great display. Let's see how this looks. Look at that. If you are curious, that enamel bowl is older than I am. And here I was worried it would fall apart. This thing is solid. Now it's important to let that cool an hour in the vessel, then flip it over to let it cool outside the container for another 30 minutes. If you think this will get cold, oh no. There was so much held heat, this thing kept warm for nearly 4 hours, even when carved into. That dough holds everything in. As for accompaniments, I had a bowl of freshly grated Parmesan, grated nutmeg, and a bottle of homemade hot sauce. And here comes the reveal.
Everybody that came in bought, but we weren't crazy.
I am not going to say what that reminds me of.
That did stay
What
up.
is it?
It's funny because
It is I have made a Timpano.
Always have
That's
half of
alternative
it.
by front of the cake, so now I know.
Or you can take that generous piece.
All right, let's see it.
So is it like layered or is it?
Oh, wow.
oh my god,
Okay, that,
that
looks
is
really
amazing.
I am so fucking happy.
You want to put it on my plate if you
Yeah.
want?
So that's it. For 9 people, we got about halfway into this thing, so room to spare. This was a fantastic experience, and I will state that I won't make it again like this. One recipe said to add ricotta stuffed shell pasta, which I may try, but I like the idea of variations, like of 2 variations of pasta, variations of sausage. There's so much you can do. But this was my Timpano. If you have any questions, post them below, and I'll answer. I hope to do one of these each year from now on, but don't be afraid to tackle such a recipe. It's worth it. Anyway, guys, like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Lo venimma a mercheta e perché gli ne scusam.